Okay, maybe next week you won't have to listen to the whole thing. Thank you all. It is my privilege and my pleasure to be serving here as your community spiritual leader. And this month, we're kicking off a new month of March. I love spring, and so I love that we're going to be doing those seedlings for Earth Day as well. This month, we're looking at living in spiritual integrity. And so if someone asked you, are you living in spiritual integrity? What would your answer be? Have you even ever thought about spiritual integrity? I know I hadn't until I saw this as a possible topic for this month. I believe most of us want to live our lives in integrity. At least I know that that word is something I really like, and I've tried to incorporate into my life. But how does it apply to spirituality? And how is spiritual integrity any different than just plain old integrity? So I'm going to ask it in a little different way. Who are we spiritually? And does who we are, and how does who we are spiritually show up in all areas of our life, in every aspect of who we are? Well, we have 5 Sundays this month to grapple with this topic and contemplate it. And I do want to remind you that if you have to miss a Sunday, then you can always go to YouTube and see what the other people have to say about this topic. Ernest Holmes says, the I am is a universal spirit responding to us, the breath of our breath, the identity of our person, the integrity of our own soul, the immortality of our spirit, a deathless, birthless, changeless principle indwelling in our own soul. Well, last month we spent a lot of time talking about oneness, and I even mentioned that it seems like we spend a lot of time talking about oneness all the time. And once again, looking at spiritual integrity is taking us back to that idea that there's an indwelling principle that we are one with, that is my breath and my identity and the integrity of my soul. So what exactly does integrity mean? You know me, I'm always checking things out in the dictionary. The online dictionary says that integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles or moral uprightness. The second definition, the state of being whole and undivided, the condition of being unified, unimpaired, or sound in construction. Internal consistency or the lack of corruption, and then they said in electronic data, but I liked that idea whether it's in electronic data or in me. Internal consistency and the lack of corruption. Merriam-Webster said, firm adherence to a code of especially moral or artistic values, incorruptibility, an unimpaired condition, soundness, the quality or state of being complete or undivided. Now, you may be surprised, I'm sure you won't be, that the Science of Mind magazine is focused on integrity this month. And the very first day of March in their affirmation, it talks about integrity. And they also have an article in here, The Art of Spiritual Integrity, the art of spiritual integrity. And they define the word as coming from the root word integrate, which means to combine one thing with another so they become whole. So what is it that we're combining together in a manner that enables us to become whole? Spiritually speaking, it means bringing our awareness of our oneness with God, wholeness, into the many different aspects or parts of our lives. Then they say, easy enough, right? Well, read on. So you might want to get this and read that article. But I liked that definition. So as I looked through all these various definitions, when I heard about the being sound of construction, I thought about a building. We talk about it having integrity. And I thought, well, that doesn't really apply to us spiritually. And then I kept thinking about that. And I thought about how it is that we're put together structurally in our spiritual life. What makes us whole and gives us that integrity that's as firm and strong as, say, steel beams, or those studs and struts and how they're put together that create strength in a building. How do we have strength that's built into our spiritual life? I was thinking about that which keeps us upright when we're experiencing something that could feel like an earthquake in our life. We talk about buildings being structurally having structural integrity that withstand earthquakes. So what in us allows us to withstand those things that feel like earthquakes in our lives? Well, I think that there's nothing that can rock us more than the idea of death. And I think that often the fears that we have go back to our fear of death or our fear of someone else dying. And lately, this topic has been very acute in my life because a couple weeks ago, Brenda came home from a class that she's taking out at Doñana Community College and said that her teacher had sent in a sub because she had a family emergency related to her son, and she wasn't able to attend. And earlier that morning, I had read on Facebook a post by Nancy Walzak's little sister through the Big Sister, Little Sister program, where she was saying, "I'm going to really miss you, my friend. We were really good friends, R.I.P." And I thought, something clicked that those two must be connected. And sure enough, Brenda's teacher lost her son at 16 years old. Apparently he got sick and went very quickly. And so that was on our minds, and our hearts were holding her teacher. Not for me, I can't even fathom having to experience something like that. And then the reason that I'm speaking this Sunday and next Sunday back to back is because on the third Sunday or the third weekend of March, I will be attending the memorial for a woman that was like a godmother to me. Our families spent a lot of time together, so she was the other mother in that family, and she actually came to my graduation from Holmes Institute, the only person from my family to do that. And then while I'm putting this talk together, I get a call from a very dear friend, and someone who I was very close to back in my 20s is making her transition right now. I haven't gotten the word, but it's imminent. And so I was thinking about that, and then they sang about it, which, go figure. It's only to be expected. And then within the last several weeks, I've had friends and people come to me and share their physical challenges. Physical challenges that have caused us to think in terms of our physical mortality, even while we're considering and holding tight to our belief in our spiritual immortality. And so I think that's the challenge. How do we live fully? How do we stay in spiritual integrity while we're dealing with and experiencing physical mortality while holding on to our beliefs and understanding of spiritual immortality? Because we believe, and I think most people here believe in some kind of spiritual immortality, that, as Holmes says, the average person desires to live beyond the grave. And he has an entire chapter in the Science of Mind text called Immortality. And he talks about how it is that is the truth of who we are, that our spirit lives on forever. So given that we believe that, in some form or another, whatever way you might believe it, whether it's reincarnation, whether it's the spirit going on, whatever way it is that you might picture that, imagine saying to the mother who lost her child then, "Well, I'm sure he's in a better place. It must have been his time. Everything is in divine order." Or to the person experiencing physical challenges, "Don't worry about your body, your spirit will live forever." Or, and this one I'm glad we don't hear so much anymore, but we used to hear quite a lot, "What were you thinking that caused you to manifest this in your life?" Imagine saying that to the mother of this 16-year-old child. Now, all of those comments actually have a tie back to something that we probably all believe. And they all tie back to a piece of what it is that we teach here. In fact, I had a student ask me once in the foundations class up in Albuquerque, is it okay to cry when a loved one dies? She'd been reading all of what we teach and wasn't sure that it was even okay to cry. And it reminded me of sitting at my grandmother's dinner table once. I don't remember what the occasion was, but my uncle was there, and they had invited a woman over to join us. My grandmother, the woman, and my uncle were all part of the Christian Science tradition. I had not found religious science yet. And the woman said to my uncle, who was a Christian Science practitioner, you know, I lost my little dog this last week, and I just can't stop crying. Is that wrong? Should I stop crying? And he told her very gently, but he told her, yes, she shouldn't be crying over the death of her little dog. And something in me just felt for her. I wanted to take her aside and say, cry all you want, it's okay. But I didn't have a place to do that at that time. But something didn't set with me right. And as we say, it's all good and it's all God. Again, all of this rooted in the truth of what we teach. How do we then, as we're considering spiritual integrity, that which makes us whole, that's what unifies us, what keeps us structurally sound, what contributes then to our spiritual strength? How do we stay grounded in the truth of what we believe and still contribute to the spiritual integrity of ourselves and others, given those kinds of experiences that we might have in our life? In the first day of March in the Affirmations in the Science of Mind magazine, the author says, the deeper you go, the less you will be shaken. And I thought about that. I pictured the ocean, you know, all the turmoil on top, and as you get deeper, it calms and it's quieter. And I thought about those responses that we make sort of quickly from that space of what we believe, and I think of those as kind of surface responses, but they continue to shake. They don't allow for that deepening. And so I thought about how if we go within, if we really deepen and connect with that part of us, the I am, the one that we are, then we can find a place, maybe in silence, maybe we don't need to say anything, where we can connect and really speak and act and move from that deeper place. And that will help us to strengthen ourselves and to strengthen others. Last month, after I was done speaking, someone texted me and said, well, how do you respond to people who make rude comments to you? And I had to think back about what I'd said. And I think I was talking again about being in alignment with the one and letting us respond to people from that place. And so once again, I believe it's about moving deeper inside, looking for that scaffolding that's within us, that structural integrity that we have, and connecting with that before we speak or respond. So I was looking at my bottom line. What I've been working on for the last several years is that place within me where I say, I am the I am one with the one, and the one, the I am, to me is also love. So again, the song was right on. I look at love as being that structural piece that I can touch back into, hold tight onto as everything's shaking. And if I can think about how love can be present in whatever that situation is, then I can trust more of what I say and what I do and how I respond. So when I was asked that question, is it okay to cry? I didn't know what the teaching taught at that time. I was still pretty new. I was a brand new practitioner. So I wanted to look up and see what Ernest Holmes had to say about grief and about this whole idea of how do we handle those emotions that we have as humans. So in the Science of Mind text, in that chapter I was telling you about on immortality, there's several things that I'm picking from and have put together here. It is human to grieve over the loss of dear ones. We love them and cannot help missing them. but a true realization of the immortality and continuity of the individual soul will rob our grief of hopelessness. Time heals all wounds, adjusts conditions, explains facts. Further on, we must give ourselves time to work out all problems. And then he says, he weaves all of that in through all of the ideas that we are immortal spiritually and that we can hold on to what it is that gives us hope. And he says this and finalizes it with, as the eagle freed from its cage soars to its native heights, so the soul, freed from the home of heavy flesh, will rise and return to its maker's house, naked and unafraid. He's very poetic. So I looked also for how he addresses other experiences that we might be having that are rocking our world or making us feel like we're experiencing that earthquake. So in regard to physical challenges and treating for health, and this is in the chapter Mental and Spiritual Treatment, I'm on page 175, he says, in the language of metaphysics, a demonstration is made when the thing is accomplished which the one treating desires to achieve. Whether it be health, happiness, or abundance, a demonstration is a manifestation. It is a prayer answered. But further on he says, but we should not fool ourselves. This is not a process of saying peace when there is no peace. And again, in this chapter, he talks about how it's important that our words are not just words that we're saying, but they come from that deeper feeling place, and that we speak them with a deep knowing and an understanding of what it is we're really connecting with, and not just something we throw out there to try and make ourselves, if not somebody else, feel better. So as I was looking for these things, it was almost like Spirit was confirming it even more for me. I was compelled to pull the book Beverly Hills Lectures of Ernest Holmes. This one. This is a fun book. It takes lectures that he gave and has transcribed them. So you get a little different flavor of his personality. I pulled this off the shelf, and this is what I opened to. On the page under Treating to Improve Conditions, this is not a method whereby we say that people are not sick or poor or weak or unhappy. This is not something where we say peace, peace, when there is no peace. He says that in several different places. Our motto is to know and to do. And of course, there's a lot more there in terms of what it is we can do and how we can bring spiritual mind treatment to work for us. So what I was gathering from all this is that the key is that we strengthen our spiritual integrity, that scaffolding within us. And as we do that, our grief then, as he says, is not robbed of hopelessness. So in other words, we maintain a sense of hope no matter what we're experiencing. We can deepen and go, like I said, to that calm place further within us. And then again, I was looking on the internet because I didn't have my books with me when I first started working on this. So I was looking up integrity, and I found a website and a blog which might be of interest to you called New Thought Evolutionary. And in there it said, New Thought teachings are about the realization of an empowerment, a birthright which has always existed and has never diminished. It is not a teaching about how to hide from harsh conditions. It is a teaching about how to transcend them by transforming consciousness. So again, spiritual integrity isn't about finding a way to keep life from happening and doing what it does. It's about strengthening ourselves so that we maintain that hope and that ability to transcend. And I feel it's also important to maintain our mindfulness and our presence in the midst of that. We can have both things occurring at once. It reminded me of during our graduation from Holmes Institute when Dr. Reverend Kathy Hearn said, "Don't become so spiritual that you're no longer any earthly good." And when I thought about some of those responses, even though they're rooted in our spirituality, I think they come from a place of where we are so spiritual that we're no earthly good. We're not creating compassion and comfort. when we spew some of that, even if it's rooted in truth. So again, we're looking for how to get spirit-led, how to connect on that deeper level. So what gives you spiritual strength? What builds that integrity or structural soundness that we want to have on a spiritual level? Well, many of the things I'm going to mention, you've heard mentioned over and over, and what I know from hearing them over and over is it took many, many, many years before it clicked and went, oh, maybe I need to try that. So I'm going to repeat them again. We talk about reading inspirational things, looking at whether they're books or the magazine or the texts and writings of Ernest Holmes. We talk about journaling, allowing ourselves to write out and process through writing what's going on inside of us. We can write out our treatments and our prayers, or we can say them, whatever works best for us, but using prayer and treatment as a tool. We can contemplate or meditate. We could take a walk in nature. And we could listen to positive things. Hay House Radio has a program that you can get on the internet and listen to a lot of positive speakers and upbeat programs that they have. Or you can always go to YouTube Spiritual Pathways and listen to all the talks that Randy has put up on our site and hear what other people have said over the years. Each time we listen, we're going to hear something different. Another aspect will speak to us. Anytime we do any kind of healing work, whether we're working with a practitioner through a 12-step program or with a counselor or on our own, anytime we're working on healing, we're building our spiritual integrity, that structural soundness. And I also think it's important to connect with other people who have spiritual integrity, who are structurally sound. If we're feeling like we're wobbling, somebody else's strength can help to hold us up in that moment and in that time. In the Healing Consciousness group on Thursday, we were talking about all of these things that we've mentioned as being tools in our toolbox to help us when we're dealing with whether we want to heal spiritually, physically, emotionally, whatever is showing up for us. And we added 2 other tools. We added forgiveness and gratitude. And as we were talking about that, someone mentioned that it's important to just let it go. And this person shared, though, that to just, when we say again, if that just comes off the surface, just let it go. Sometimes we don't know how to let it go. We're so attached, and it's so difficult in that moment. How do we just let it go? So she said someone had told her, let it be. There's a little difference in feeling. Just let it be. And we really liked that, so I wanted to share that with all of you. And again, in my mind, that's allowing us to deepen as we go within. And then the other thing we've talked about was how important it is, once we do connect inwardly, to figure out whether it's time to let it be or when it's time to take action and what that action looks like. And if we're connected, when we consciously connect, then we will be guided in how it is we need to take action if we need to take action. So all of these are tools that help to strengthen your spirituality. Think of them as those steel beams, those struts and studs within you that help to support you whenever other things might be showing up in your life. And so I know it sounds familiar. We're one with the one. I am the I am. All of this, the essence of our spiritual integrity. And what it comes down to then is it's actually impossible not to be structurally sound. But what I hope you're hearing today is that Ernest Holmes knew, and I think we all know, that there are moments when we feel like we're structurally unsound. Even though it's impossible to not be one with the one, it's impossible to really not be structurally sound, it starts to feel that way. Things start to rock. Things start to challenge us. And when everything feels like it's falling apart, that's when it's really good to have a really strong spiritual integrity within. 10 years ago now, I can't believe it's been 10 years, I spent the last 9 weeks of my mother's life with her. And I know I refer to this often, and I thought about that, and I realized it's because it's probably the hardest thing I ever did in my entire life. Prior to that, it was waiting patiently to get a child. But this didn't compare in any way. And what I realized is that there's people who have had even more traumatic experiences than that in their life. People who have experienced things that I can't even imagine, like this woman who lost her child. And so my point isn't for us to compare who's had the most traumatic experience in our life. My point is, what kept us strong? What is our stronghold in the midst of those kinds of challenges? What is our spiritual scaffolding made of? And at the time I was going through that, I kept repeating to myself the benediction that's set out at Wellspring. Spirit in the midst of us is mighty. Joy, peace, and eternal life are our true nature, and they move through us into the world. And sometimes when I was standing in my kitchen, the only words I got out were, Spirit in the midst of us is mighty. And that caused me to feel more strength. I just held on to that. I didn't have time to meditate. I didn't have time. I was moving nonstop from the time I woke up to the time I fell asleep at night. And that mantra is what went through my head. Spirit in the midst of us is mighty. So what messages then do you tell yourself when your world feels like it's crumbling? Are the messages things that cause the world to feel even more like it's crumbling? Or are they messages that add to the inner strength, your spiritual integrity, something you can hang on to and hold on to at those times? And if the messages that you know you tell yourself aren't as strong as you'd like them to be, I really encourage you to work with a practitioner. That's what we're here to do with you. And again, like I said last time, it's a gift to us as well as to you. I think we don't really make use of the talent and skills that our practitioners have here at this center, because I don't hear of a lot of sessions going on. And so I really, really encourage you to take that time to do some of this inner spiritual strengthening work. And what you could come out of, and what you most likely will come out of, is that positive affirmation that you can say, that you can hold on to in the midst of something that might feel earth-shaking. You can also take, if your challenge is prosperity in any level, take the class with Teresa that's coming up. Or if you want to just learn how all this stuff works, jump into our new foundations class that'll be in April. Again, we'll go over the basics, but if you've had it before, it's always good to review sometimes. So I just encourage everyone. And then what we do is we practice, practice, practice. I thought about, how do we build physical strength? We do the word that I don't like, which is exercise. And so I thought about, I'm not going to call it exercise anymore. I'm going to call it practicing physical strength. That feels better to me. I'm going to just keep practicing my physical strength. And I was given the opportunity this semester to do that a lot because I have classes that are on the second or third floor. And instead of taking the elevator, I decided to practice my physical strength and take the stairs every time. Yeah, and I tell you, when I went out to White Sands last week, I was able to go up the side of one of those sandy hills, and I don't think I would have made it if I hadn't been going up and down those stairs since January. It also reminded me of when my son was little. I used to sing him to sleep, and I had a 15-minute repertoire that I did, and it only took about 15 minutes, and he'd be asleep. And so at home when I did this, it was quiet, it was peaceful. I'd sing him to sleep and put him in his bed. But then I started noticing I could do that in a movie theater. I did it in restaurants. I did it at people's houses. I could sing quietly in his ear, and in 15 minutes he'd be asleep, no matter how noisy or raucous it was around us. And so I think it's important that we train ourselves to move to that depth with spiritual lullabies, so to speak. Ways that we can sing ourselves or think ourselves into that space. The minute you hear whatever it is that you've trained and practiced into your mind, it will move you to that place, just like a lullaby can move a child to sleep. It'll help us reach that deeper space. And to me, that's part of that structure. It's part of that spiritual integrity. Our spiritual oneness, then, that enlightenment, if you want to call it that, doesn't stop life from happening. After all, we came here for some reason to have this human experience. But that oneness that we remember that we have with Spirit, that integrity that we develop, helps us to move through and withstand these challenges that show up. They remain in us that space of hope when we feel grief. They help us transcend when we need to. They help us remember to move deeply and help us get to that deeper space, to stay grounded, fully immersed so we can come out whole on the other side. So next week, we're going to look at spiritual integrity again, and this time I'm going to look at the other definition that was there in terms of how it is that we interact with the world through honesty, our principles, and internal consistency. But this week, I challenge you to consider what it is that gives you spiritual strength. What is your spiritual integrity built on? What is the structure that you have inside of you? And then I challenge you to raise the bar. Raise the bar a little bit. Increase your spiritual strength. Take some time to add to your spiritual practice, whatever it might be, so that you can grow a little stronger in what it is that holds you up. When I was in high school, as a senior, we got to put a little saying under our photograph. And my saying that I put under my photograph was, "Yet those who wait upon the Lord will gain new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not faint." And so today, when I think about that, I learned from Reverend Sam that if you see the words "the Lord," you can translate them into the law, as Ernest Holmes talks about law and love. And so today I would say, as I practice the law, as I practice letting that law be part of my spiritual integrity, I will gain new strength. I will rise up as on wings of eagles. I will run and not be weary, and I will walk and not faint. And why is that so? Because I am the I am, and so it is.